Welcome to Together, a higher ed podcast where we bring you stories, insights, and experiences from voices across the higher education sector. I'm Chase Haygood, the Vice Provost for Student Success at the University of Utah. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Dr. Erin Castro and Dr. Andy Eisen of the Utah Prison Education Project. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks.
Great to be here.
So I'm really eager for folks, listeners, and viewers to get to know both of you, to get to know more about the project. Many people already know about your work here at the University of Utah, throughout the state of Utah. We're really delighted to have you here. To get started, I'd love for both of you to share a little bit more about your journey in higher education, about your work in prison education or incarcerated education, and the role that you currently have with, as we know it, UPEP.
So, like Erin, I started higher education in prison as a graduate student at the University of Illinois, where we had the opportunity to work with Dr. Rebecca Ginsburg with the Education Justice Project. And as a graduate student, it was a transformative moment in my education and the way that I saw the world and the potential I saw for what higher education can be.
Yeah.
So I had a kind of small role in EJP as a teaching assistant in classes. I ran a workshop in the summer, but even with that limited experience that I had in Illinois, decided that's what I wanted to do for a career. After finishing my PhD, I moved to Florida with my wife, Pamela Capastoro, who is also now involved in higher education in prison here. We started a program together at a small liberal arts school, Stetson University, the Community Education Project, where we were able to get credit-bearing classes for 20 incarcerated individuals, ran a project there for almost a decade, and then moved out here to work with Erin.
Awesome.
Yeah, well, so it's interesting because Andy and I both worked. EJP is the Education Justice Project at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and we didn't realize it until after we graduated that we had actually volunteered with the project at the same time. And I kind of attribute that to both the size of that and the kind of organization, the processes. We would have been maybe out at the prison at the same time, but would have never interacted because we were focused on, one component of a much larger project. And so one of the reasons that what Andy didn't mention is that I had been trying to recruit him and Pamela here for many years, because I think one of the things that we saw as graduate students that we couldn't have articulated at the time, or probably wouldn't have, is that we were really learning how to run a program, how to get this how to build it, how to grow it, how to deal with the challenges. And we had the just opportunity to see something and be part of something that was incredible. And I think I really value working with my friends and colleagues because we know what prison education can be. We've seen it. We've done it. We know what's possible. And I like that we have that vision because I think not very many people have that. It's not very often that you've got a major R1. I mean, Illinois is the land grant, and you're leveraging resources of that institution into a prison. Yeah. So I think, yeah.
If I could just add to that, that experience as a graduate student and seeing how Rebecca ran the program, how she connected with students, and how she provided the autonomy for students inside to make decisions about what the program would look like and how that helped the program flourish. That experience, more than anything, I think has informed not only how we do the work, but also our belief that this work can be special if done correctly.
Yeah.
So can I ask you both? So one of the things we chat, first of all, thank you. And we chat with a lot of folks as they're willing to spend their time and energy just kind of talking through like how the work of higher education gets done from multiple, again, different angles and perspectives. So one, what I hear in both of your story is that we've got Rebecca Ginsburg to thank for seeding ideas and practice throughout their career, the people that they were mentoring, the people that they brought along, the people that they said, come over here and let me make sure that you get exposed to a different set of ideas and the potential of higher education as a public good. What that can look like, what it can feel like. Not that it's without challenge sometimes. Sure. Could you talk a little bit about what that role of Ginsberg as a mentor and then the peer aspects of that, even if I follow up on what you were saying, Erin, like the size of the program at Illinois so large that two graduate students, I imagine one in education and one in history, would not have known that each other were engaged until sometime after, and then reconnecting. I mean, that's a really beautiful thing that I think sometimes only can happen through higher education. That you find out, like sometimes we talk about our academic grandmothers or academic grandfathers or whomever. It's like, oh, wait, now you're a provost at this university. We had the same graduate advisor when, she was at another institution, but we have that common bond and that connection. Can you all talk a little bit about that? What the power in that? Because what I'm hearing from both of you is that there's a connection there to somebody who was very powerful in their influence and impact in, to borrow your phrase, Andy, which I love, how you see the world. Right? You see it differently because of the experience that you had with this person in higher education. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair. What I would say is that I don't think, 15 years ago, Rebecca would have said, I'm teaching you how to run a program. And I think I was given, and I'm certain you were as well, a great degree of autonomy with that project. I had responsibilities. I could do what I wanted in classes. And she trusted me to do that as a young person, as a graduate student. And I wasn't afraid of messing up. Like there wasn't this, and I think upon reflection, that it was my first introduction to a kind of leadership where this isn't like Dr. Ginsberg has all the answers. She's like, oh, no, I have no idea why the prison is doing this. Let's figure it out. And I thrived. I thought, wow, this is, not only is it, but look what my peers are doing. And they're, Andy's not talked about it, but maybe you can share the story of your experience with Mexican-American and Chicano history inside the prison. Because I think that's really impactful too.
Yeah, so as a graduate student in my third or fourth year, I can't recall, it was unclear to me at that time, what do I have to give inside of the prison, right? It's an experience that wasn't mine. It was a community that was not the community I had grown up with. And I didn't really know what there was for a historian to do inside of a prison. And I was invited to work with the Language Partners program, which was a group of mostly, but not exclusively, Mexican-American men, Mexican men teaching other folks inside how to speak and read and write English. And as you can imagine, this was a proposal that came from them. They saw a need inside of the prison. They saw how folks who couldn't speak the language were having additional challenges inside of the prison. They didn't know how to get to commissary, how to send mail. If an officer was speaking to them and they weren't following directives, they could then be punished because they didn't understand them. And so this was kind of a need for that a student, Ramon, saw as he wanted to give back to the program and to help his peers. And so I got thrown into that program, and I thought, I'm not a language teacher. I don't know how to teach ESL. I don't know what I have to give. But it was this moment where I was taking a lot of Latinx studies courses. My dissertation was studying Mexican-American history, border policing, and I was just talking with the guys in the classroom, like, we want to know about that. It's funny because often when you're talking about your dissertation, you don't hear the response, we want to know more.
Right.
And so...
perhaps only at select dinner parties.
Very select.
And peers, that are in the same kind of process, like, where are you? Like, Where are you today with your project?
I'll just say I've never had a conversation with my family where the question was, tell me more about that. And what was clear to me is that I was in a very incredibly privileged position to be taking these Latino studies courses, that there was such a desire from the guys inside to have access to those resources. And it was very clear at that moment that what I could do as a graduate student was share syllabi, bring in copies of books and readings. And what the Men in the Language Partners program ended up doing was to take these really complicated texts about Mexican American history, and they turned them into language lessons. And so that's not something I would have ever imagined on my own. But what I did have was access to resources, some limited expertise in the field. And then to kind of circle back to the question of Rebecca, that kind of respect and autonomy that Rebecca gave graduate students to build something special and a trust.
Mm-hmm.
What I hear in that as well, and I'd love for either of you to comment on it because I see it, and we'll talk about more of this in a moment, but I see it with both of you in your leadership roles at the University of Utah. So we're going to put a very bright pin here and circle back around to it. But part of it is not only, it sounds from Dr. Ginsberg's perspective, but also from your all's perspective of a willingness to engage, to see an opportunity, to be vulnerable in an experience, to say, can I grow into this? Can I construct with the learners in this particular environment to meet needs that they have, not only in an immediate and a short-term way, but a long-term way? Right? To me, I mean, there is power in that. The power of the vulnerability of someone who's yes, engaging in the leadership of a program, but also being, to your point, Erin, willing to say, like, I don't know what the answer is to that, but I bet we can figure something out through partnership and collaboration and the like.
And all of us together, and asking the students. I think it's, you know this perhaps better than most. We don't have a culture in higher ed that tends to value vulnerability and the kinds of dispositions like curiosity required in exploration. Now, we do in certain spaces, but I think part of the challenge in, when the program started in 2006 and when I started, it was in 2010. And it was still very amorphous. Like there wasn't no like, here's our website and our org chart, like none of that. But all of us were working. And I think like if I'm taking something away from all of this as well, is that we can use the word innovation if folks want, fine. But there has to be these spaces where we are able to make mistakes, to build these new kinds of relationships. That's not going to be perfect. And I think that experience is partly why I'm committed to doing the work regardless of what it looks like. Like, I think we talk a lot about, like, it's not going to be perfect. Like, this, just the nature of inequality and the kind of history of mass punishment, like, this is never going to be perfect. And if perfection is kind of the barrier, we would never start this kind of work. So I don't know if you have.
I would just say that this conversation is really making me think about what it means to build a community of learners, and what it means to be part of that community when folks are entering from such different places, right? I'm entering with a PhD and years of teaching. Graduate students may not have that. Our incarcerated students are entering with sets of knowledges and experiences that are going to be critical to the success of the program. But there is a power imbalance, right? I walk in, I walk out. Graduate students do the same. And the hard work of building a community of learners within that space is presence, is just time in the prison, building trust, creating a shared vision about what this project can be. So Erin and I have seen what the best or one of the best programs in the country does, and we're trying to replicate those things here. And it's getting buy-in from folks inside about what we're doing, because if you're creating a community of learners, there is a shared vision, right? It's not coming top down from me, and it's also not coming exclusively from graduate students or incarcerated learners. It's coming together and kind of parsing through different ideas and having some faith in one another that the things that we're promising, that they're true, they're accurate, that we can actually accomplish them. And I think over the last year in particular, our program has grown in the kind of belief from all sides that this is something special. It's worthy of investments of everyone's time, energy. That we're seeing some of the kind of the fruits of our labor.
Thank you both. Like, that explanation makes me think a little bit, and if I can borrow from you, Andy, like the word faith. Our ability, like innovation writ large, like we were to think about innovation or our ability, the University of Utah, one of our slogans or one of the things that kind of has lasting relevance, it seems, is imagine and then do, right? To hear you both describe, and what I have watched of both of your work, and I marvel at it and am inspired by it, is the ability to, here's a challenge. How do we surround that challenge and start thinking through ways that together we can sort through possible solutions. But it's not a, to borrow the way that you were describing it, Erin, it's not, if we were to wait and have this kind of paralysis through analysis, wherein like the challenge it has been there. It's, as sociologists describe them as wicked kind of challenges that have been around for a couple hundred years. The way in which we tackle any of that, I mean, it's inspiring to watch the work. So I just want to pause for a second and say that to both of you. Like, the way in which an uphill kind of build of a program, even with a great example at the University of Illinois, to do that fresh, to do that on, in a framework and a set of parameters that, again, were not necessarily built to allow for that kind of innovation. In fact, they were very much built not to permit that kind of innovation, but it's seeing the challenge, seeing the opportunities, and then beginning to kind of construct coalitions and teams of folks who can come together and say, like, okay, here's what we're going to do. Is it going to work? Well, no one knows whether or not that's going to work. We believe and we have faith that, right? And although the oft, quoted, like, hope is not a strategy, well, there's still a lot of power in the hope that we can make impact. So if with that, if I've got some of that right, talk a little bit about like the origins of Utah Prison Education Project, and if there's a way to get us through a timeline, just so that folks understand, like, okay, this is where it's kind of the seed bed is. It's got linkage to good friends and colleagues over at the University of Illinois, and that's where both of you kind of came up in the work, helped kind of shape worldview of how the work can be done, should be done. Energized perhaps, and then like national kind of groups and conversations that I know that you all are threaded into and are leading, in fact. Can you share a little bit of that background and that story?
Yeah, I think I'll just start by saying that Andy is now, he reminds me, pretty much launched 2 programs, and I think that requires a lot of labor.
Yeah.
So I want to just acknowledge when, the director says, it requires being at the prison. This guy's at the prison. I'm like, why are you going out to the prison? And it is because he has to be there at this point of a program. I mean, that, the trust. And so I think, in terms of a timeline, I came out here in 2012, fresh off of a dissertation defense. And I spent the next 2 years traveling back to Illinois to work with a group of incarcerated scholars on writing and conferences and things like that. And it wasn't until 2013, the following year, where I reached out to the person at corrections at that time, like for the first time, just kind of hey, I'm a kind of a random, what's happening? And he responded. He's since retired, but he said nothing. He's like, we have Davis Technical College, but he shared that USU had been out there, but had pulled out in like 2008, 2009. And then in 2015, we're doing a conference and Johnny Page had been out. Johnny is a scholar and a writing partner. And we're at the ASH conference. And Rebecca's there because we're on the panel together. Rob Scott was there. And she asked, she's like, so what are you doing? I'm like, well, I just got this tenure track position and, I've got to, do these things. And she just kind of looked at me and I was like, I mean, I can't start a prison program pre-tenure. And she just honestly looks at me. And if you know Rebecca, you know the look. She's like, well, why? You know how long these things take. Why wouldn't you start right now? And I remember thinking, she's right. So 2015 came back. At that time, Sylvia Torti was the dean for the Honors College. She had invited me to teach a praxis lab. She was super supportive of the work, but we didn't have a program yet. I knew some people on campus, but not a ton. And so was able to design this year-long praxis lab around college and prison. And so we took a year with 11 undergrad phenomenal students, and we studied the best prison education programs in the country. The students called and did interviews with directors. We collected all sorts of information. I flew across the country. I feel like I was much younger then, with 11 students and rented a 12-passenger bus and took them to the conference, and it was perfect because what came out of that, and I tried to model, the students went out, we had conversations with incarcerated people. And what came out of that was the launch of this. And I think that's special at an institution like this. And there's no way it would have happened without incredible undergraduate students. In very similar ways, I think, to what we did, like going all in, going to the prison, dedicating time, kind of really wanting to do it and learn it well. And then at that same spring of 2017 that we started, Salt Lake Community College also started at the Utah State Prison. That was when it was in Draper. The following year, they ended up getting one-time appropriations and then ongoing appropriations to start that work. Davis Technical College continued and even has grown since the move to the new prison. And then, Utah's not unique in this sense, but if you want something, if you want access to higher education, let's say you already have your associate's degree, let's say you haven't gotten into UPEP yet, there's a whole other third space. Correspondence, and there are excellent correspondence programs, strong accreditation. I'm looking at you, Adams State. And there are less credible ones, low quality ones of questionable value that really thrive in this space. And in 2017, there was a lot of that happening. I don't know what that looks like now, but I think part of what we tried to do in those early years was just print out, that's when we were still using the language of regional accreditation, but just print out for people. Like, if you earn your credits here,
right,
they're not. And so I think we're in a perhaps a better place than that now. But about 3 years ago, SUU got ongoing funding to provide dual credit concurrent enrollment courses for youth inside youth in custody facilities. We still do not have a comprehensive post-secondary pathway set up for kids in custody.
Can we say yet?
Yet. I know. I can't ask Andy to do anything more right now.
Right.
What am I missing in terms of credit bearing?
Well, through the Honors College, there was some credit-bearing classes before we started the degree
That's true. Oh, and BYU.
in BYU.
Yeah. And so our good friends at BYU, phenomenal colleagues, man, they started before COVID, right? 2019-ish, before you were here. And just said, hey, I like what you're doing. Can I teach? And then recruited another person. And then, our program manager right now is a BYU alum who interned with her professor in the project. And it's like, that is the kind of, and I think that, you had mentioned there are other kind of ways to kind of get to what you're doing. I think part of what's unique about being here at the University of Utah and doing this work is that we're also trying to mentor and teach. And I think, Andy was in a conversation just a couple weeks ago with, one of our students, and, the student had said something about, something that had we heard it, seemingly innocuous, but like, had we heard it, we might have been like, and Andy's response was, I'd like for you to think about that. Like, just take some time and think about that. And I think that kind of culture, this idea that, like, come with us, you got to have faith in us too. Like this, you're not going to agree with everything, and ask questions. And yeah, there are going to be some things that you can't do, but ask why, and let us, tell you.
Yeah.
And show you.
Yeah.
And one of the values of having such a great mentor like Rebecca is that now we know how to model it, right? And so it's not just the building of a program. And when we were building in Florida, our program, Rebecca was the first person to write a check for our project. She visited the program, gave a talk at Stetson, of all places, and was a huge supporter. And then you kind of see through action. I think a good mentor is someone who that you feel when you're around someone who's a good mentor, who is looking out for you and also can give you a nudge when you need one of start now, Erin. What are you waiting for?
It's going to take 10 years. You might as well get started.
Right.
So let's push timeline into COVID. So we talk a little bit about that because I want to make sure then we land Andy.
We land
and
Andy and
Pamela.
Yes.
So when, like,
critical.
Erin, can you help sort that out? Like when, where, and how? And then I want to transition us to like, where are we going next? Challenges, opportunities, and the like. But
yeah,
the story's not full to present yet.
No, and I think at this time, I'm a faculty member in Ed Leadership and Policy. And so, again, what I wouldn't have imagined 10 years ago is that I started studying prison higher ed as a scholar, as a researcher. And so I knew at the time that we had fewer, in 2015, we had fewer than 100 at that time regionally accredited institutions doing this work. And that number has grown exponentially. And so in 2019, got some funding from Lumina to study at the Second Chance Pell, essentially. And that allowed me to kind of get a sense of what other states were doing and kind of how, especially around federal student aid, like how folks were figuring this out, if they were. And, Andy and I and Pamela saw each other, at least a couple times a year because we were, a couple times a year. And, I said, we're building something out here. Like, would you guys move? And could we do this together? Because I don't have an interest in doing it alone. I wanted to be able to work with them. And so we got Andy out here and Pamela. in
22.
2022. And that's why it's a blur, because that's when I had twins. So forgive me. There's like a lot of pregnant time in there. And we knew, I mean, he knew at the like, we needed to get a degree program up and running, and for lots of reasons. But I think not two big reasons. One, the students who have invested in us since 2017 have been waiting, and, it's important for those reasons. And the comprehensive kind of research intensive institution in this space is a minority. So you have 2-year schools, and career and technical schools are at about 3/4 of all institutions at this point that are providing higher ed in prison. And then it's our 4-year privates. We are a very small group right now because of all the reasons that we've got, tighter and different restrictions on how we can allocate money. But it felt really important to say, if we're going to launch a national center and we don't yet have a degree granting program, that doesn't feel quite right. And, we love Rebecca. Illinois still is not conferring a degree. And this is, 20 years later. And so I know Andy has seen an institution that's supportive but doesn't quite get there. And I think that's why we needed to really push at the front end of this, because we saw it and we needed, so I think that was another big reason why it was important to me.
I'll just add a few sentences about the process of the degree, getting that off the ground, because it's something that hadn't been done before at the University of Utah. 4-year degree, a bachelor's degree for incarcerated students. And that took so much labor from so many people in undergraduate studies and beyond to figure out, as Chase always says, what does it mean to put students first? And now that we are making incarcerated people students, what does it mean to put them first? So what parts of the application process are not are things that could cause harm inside or would become unnecessary barriers to enrollment, because folks are incarcerated and there's a whole sets of needs, and so it took a lot of work to ensure that, one, for the university, that the application looks the same, right? The students applied using the same application process. They were accepted by merit, right? We weren't putting fingers on the scales, anything like that. But to get them there, it took a team of graduate students. It took us being inside working with folks on applications and to make sure that they understood the questions being asked. Because imagine you had been inside for 15 or 20 years and suddenly you're getting an application to the University of Utah and they're asking questions that sound a little bit funny, or how does this apply to me? Because the applications weren't written with them in mind, right? And so there's a lot of translation work that has to go on. And thankfully here we've just met some really tremendous people who kind of understood that, yes, these are a set of students, but also their needs are unique, and their situation is certainly unique. And we found great people not only to get to the process of getting folks enrolled, but also to help us meet the needs of incarcerated students. So I think of Rob in IT, who has built out a computer lab that has students with access that rivals any other higher education prison program in the country, access to JSTOR, University of Utah Library, EBSCO, right? Where folks are able to do the research that is required for a degree of this sort that they're after. We couldn't, in good faith, start a program if we didn't think that students would be able to do the research and have the resources that they needed to be successful. And so we've relied on Rob, we've relied on student success coaches who've been going out and meeting with all of our students to, once we got the project rolling and the folks enrolled, to ensure that they have everything around them, the kind of full suite of resources that students require. And what I love about working here is that when I'm talking about the work in the prison, I've not yet heard from one person, why are you doing this? It's really just, oh, that sounds amazing. How do I get involved? And that hasn't always been my experience in higher ed.
That's fair. I'll just add that I think, in Chase, you and I have talked about this, of, everybody comes to the table across campus, and I'm thinking registrar, I'm thinking enrollment management at this point, financial aid, with okay, how do we address this? As opposed to the no, we're not doing this. And that has meant, we were just back and forth last week with admissions on a hold, and and I think that is just immeasurable. The fact that people in positions of power across campus don't question the effort. It is, we're doing this now. How do we get through this system that isn't set up for that? That's huge.
Can you talk a little bit about? Thank you both. You talk a little bit about. The shorthand version of it, I think, is the status quo that's often just defended by no, or disconnect, or that question of, well, why would we do that? Because I do think, having watched both of your work, I think, well, there are a lot of things that I think. I think that normal mere mortals would say, okay, well, clearly we're not going to. Clearly, there are signals of okay, this is just too complex. It's too much outside the box of quote unquote normal. But I'm wondering if either of you are willing to, because I know you're both able, but speak to how normal is not enough. If we're to realize the potential, I don't want to bias your answer, but knowing you both, if we're going to realize the potential of higher education as a public good, which I think there's a rising tide of argumentation against. What I see in the program that you both lead and the work that you both do, both from praxis and research, in so many ways it cuts against that grain. That it's it's hard work. And at what point did anybody decide that we're just going to be terrified of doing hard work? Or having hard conversations that lead us to, we can get to yes. Mm-hmm. Because, Erin, as we've worked together a little bit longer than Andy, you and I have worked together, there's a runway here of that we have continued to try to.
No.
Right. And it's kind of okay, we're going to keep going. The no may not be no tomorrow, and it may be a soft yes. And then, can either of you talk about how do you internalize that? How do you what brings your cup back up to full or half full, or because I think, again, many folks who try to accomplish programs that are of a much smaller scale are defeated much earlier on by larger systems and forces in play that have an interest in holding or defending the status quo.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think so.
I've got thoughts.
I do too. Go for it.
I think stubbornness is a good quality when it comes to this work. And more than anything, just to kind of circle back to where we started, we've seen what a tremendous higher education and prison programming can do. I have a deep understanding of the harms that prisons have historically rendered, and also know that there is so much human potential that is being wasted by the current carceral system. And in a state that cares about waste, right? It seems to me that we should look at individuals and their human potential that is going to waste, and just having a strong commitment that we're going to figure this out. And that has been something I've learned here. And it's different at this institution than others, where Erin, in the beginning, was like, we'll figure this out. And And I was like, but the numbers aren't adding up, and my eye is twitching, and I don't like. I want to be able to see those next steps, because I've been in a place where it was no, 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 despite incarcerated students publishing in top tier journals, despite a Mellon a Mellon grant that was the first of the institution's kind to build this amazing community garden at the prison. Despite all of these things, students had bought into what we were selling. They had shown up and done all the things correctly. And we were just hitting no's that was clear that after a decade weren't going to turn to yeses. And so to come here and to work with Erin, who was like, no, we're going to do this and we'll figure it out. I'm someone who's very much like, but this budget and how are we? And Erin's like, we'll figure it out. And we have.
Yeah. I think the other, yes to all of that, and a lot of that is due to your leadership too. Is that this, we can get there. There is a way forward, folks. We just have to help folks see it, and keep committed to it. I also think that in terms of normal or status quo, all these initiatives that are now on hold in higher ed that seek to expand access, and I'm reminded of Dr. Tressy's opportunity hoarding, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the norm is opportunity hoarding. The norm is that the folks who are able to go get PhDs are able to kind of be here, despite first gen or whatever.
Yep.
Is that we still have still marked by deep inequality. And I think part of the normalization of prisons is that, used to drive right past that building and folks don't think twice. It has become, it's such a structure of our culture and our life. And because of inequality, it is the students that all of these programs aim to. These are our foster students. These are our students who have experienced homelessness. These are our students with substance use histories, abuse, trauma. And then there are also transfer students. There are also students of color. They're students with disabilities, right? And so because of such just concentrated inequality, we happen to be working with a group of people who, for many, this is their very first time experiencing college. And they're the first in their family to do so. And I think part of what we learned at Illinois is that prisons, we pay for prisons. Those prisons operate because we pay taxes to support them. And I think this idea that you can't do anything about that is just not true.
Yeah.
And there is a fine line. There's a way to do this work where you reinscribe the terrible things about the prison. And we work very hard to not replicate that kind of culture. And it's hard. But the fact that nobody walks into a prison or demands to see it, that's how they thrive. And so I think that this is just one example of, what I learned. I don't think I would have ever been able to think on my own that I'm just going to walk into the prison and email somebody and say, hey, I want to do this.
Yeah.
But we saw it. And so, yeah, we're going to do this.
Yeah, the possibility, right?
Yeah.
An awareness or a consciousness to the possibility that something can be different.
Yeah.
And that, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of talk these days about, to borrow the kind of the normalization of, or seeking normal, and like seeing both of your work and work of just folks across, not just at the University of Utah, but across American higher education, when not only the normalization, but the politicization of particularly public higher education.
Yeah.
I mean, from my seat, I've said it before on this podcast, from my seat, there is tremendous effort underway and good things happening based on, back to your, I mean, it's going to stick with me for a while, Andy, based on the faith that we can have really amazing impact, both across all of our institutions, but also at the individual student level, right? Mm-hmm. And in that space, then, I don't know, for me at least, I won't speak for anybody, but for me, normal is just not good enough. I mean, normal is kind of boring, and again, replicates what we all inherited. Or if you're starting something new, it's kind of like, okay, well, we tried that, and we're going to keep moving forward, and we're going to keep extending that runway, and we're eventually going to get this plane off the ground, which you all have. I'm wondering if we transition at this point then to what comes next in terms of programming, in terms of the degree, in terms of research, with really exciting things coming soon to the University of Utah, first of its kind of work in American higher ed. So either of you, take a minute, share with us things that are coming next that you're really excited about.
You want me to start with programming and then, great. So we, as I mentioned before, we enrolled this past summer 15 incarcerated students in a bachelor's degree program for the first time in the history of the University of Utah. And we've been putting in a tremendous amount of work to ensure that that goes well, right? We've had great instructors, great faculty members teaching, bringing out, ensuring that we have resource room hours, student success coaches, that the technology is there for them. And so we're going to be picking up the pace. We've started at one class a semester, kind of getting folks accustomed to the 300 and 400 level courses, and we're about to amp it up. So this summer we will be doing 2 classes a semester, and then in the fall, it's 3. And
Nice.
so we have been kind of intentional about the build, and to give folks inside an understanding of what they have in store for them. It's one thing to tell them that expectations are raising, and that the hard work is just starting. It's another to experience it. And so they're experiencing it now in a very challenging philosophy course. And planning those 10-page papers, planning right, all of those things that we remember as undergraduate students. That I remember the first time I was asked to do a 10-page paper, and my eyes got the size of saucers, and I was like, I don't know how to do that.
Right.
Our students are going through that right now, and they've got all the support that they need to be successful, and know that they will be. So we are kind of rolling out the degree program slowly, and we're about to pick up the pace there. In addition, we have, so we enrolled 15 students, and I kept on hearing inside from other folks, the same students we enrolled, that they want more people involved. They want more people to have access to this experience. We're not in a position to do that, little by little. What we came to through kind of lengthy conversations is that the folks in the bachelor's degree program wanted to essentially be peer mentors, to support education on the compound. And even if we can't start a second bachelor's degree program right now, or a second cohort, we can ensure that the students who are enrolled in the bachelor's degree program are kind of acting as a ripple effect for the rest of the compound. We, over the last 6 months, we've been training 7 incarcerated students as they self-named education advocates. We are able to compensate them with fair wages thanks to some grant funding that we received, and a good relationship with the education team at the prison. They saw the value in it, and so starting Monday, February 3rd, we are having our first tutoring hours, where education advocates are going to be serving high school students, Davis Tech students, Salt Lake Community College students. They're signing up. I have the sign-up sheets. We have a full roster for that first day of folks who are going to come to our student center. I want to emphasize, these kinds of relationships existed before the program was kind of created, right? So many of our students were already supporting high school students. They were already kind of informally doing some tutoring. And what we've done is we've been able to bring the resources of the university, the University of Utah Reading Clinic, graduate students bringing in kind of information on pedagogy and kind of being really thoughtful about how to serve learners at different levels. And so this thing that was happening informally is now being formalized. We're able to pay folks a fair wage inside, which just doesn't happen. We are we're about to I would say 2 months from now, 3 months from now, we'll be able to say that the Student Center has served 200, 300 people. So from this small kind of cohort of 15, that kind of the benefits of higher education are kind of rippling through that one unit where we're at. And so I'm really thrilled about that project and kind of how it demonstrates the power of education to transform lives.
So I want to pause for a second before we get turned to research, just to say, Andy, your arrival at the University of Utah and Pamela's arrival at the University of Utah, none of this is possible if we take out the various people who continue to kind of push forward and build communities, right? Build like the attention to, the eyes on, the marrying of both the desire to see a program design and develop and thrive with like on the ground. Erin mentioned it earlier. It's like Andy's out of the prison. Andy's out of the prison. Yep. Andy's out of the prison. And I want you to know that we are grateful for you, for the work that you do, the work that you lead. And I believe, like you, that it does have, it sets off transformative change that we may not ever be able to tell the full story on. So there's that. And anybody who's listening or viewing, we will take any and all donations.
Yes, we will.
We've got an active in the space of grant work, and anyone who wants to give to this work and really the incredible nature of the life-changing power of education. I think that's fair to say, right, Andy? We'll take their money.
Well, and I think that's just there is no cost to participate in UPEP. There never has been, there never will be. And I think that that is what I might call a best practice or an effective practice, because we know inequality in the prison is just exacerbated. And we don't ever want costs to be a reason why somebody can't participate. And so we are raising money for tuition so that we can support students. So I don't know which camera to look at, but we will take your money.
Yeah.
And thank you.
One of the beautiful things about creating a community of learners is that we want no barriers about who can come into that space, to learn from that space, to be in that space. Just yesterday, so we're currently partnering with Sundance and Cool Hand Series to screen 4 films and 6 units where we'll have about 300 folks inside who not only get to watch these films, but they are talking with the directors and actors of the films. And if we're going to kind of build a community of learners, you asked earlier about like what fills your cup. It's like, let's build a stronger community, right? Let more people come in, more people experience it. Yep. And just yesterday, we screened a film to 100 people in 2 different units, saw folks who had never been involved in UPEP before, and their first experience is sitting and talking with folks who made this Hollywood film and that was relevant to their lives, their experiences. Folks moved by that experience and asking, how do we become part of it? And that's what we're doing. We're building a place inside of the prison and eventually out where folks can come together and kind of imagine a different kind of world and a different kind of learning that they can participate in.
Yeah.
Well said.
Really well said. Erin, off to research.
I was going to say, I think the benefit of having kind of the 3 of us with Pamela, who's here in spirit, is that, Andy can be in the prison. And so I've been able to kind of, with Pamela, usher through our prison ed application to Northwest. And we pressed submit on a grant application Friday to stand up a national center. And the Center for Research, right now tentatively titled on Education, Justice, and Opportunity, is going to kind of rightly situate, incarcerated learners as post-secondary students, which for entirely too long has not happened. We can't tell you anything about this space and how students are doing across the nation. And so I'm really excited for that. And then what Pamela is going to take the lead on is we are going to push out a credential for people, for practitioners in this space who want to do the work well and who want, who maybe didn't have the opportunity to work with Rebecca. We've got the expertise here to do that. And when we partner with folks across the country too. So the kind of third thing is we get to continue to train and mentor graduate students and talk about how best to conduct and engage research in this space. And so I'm really excited because all of this is now together at this institution.
Yeah.
Will be.
So the last question, if I can, because I've taken a lot of your time and energy, and I'm grateful for it. Last question we ask everyone, and you've talked, throughout this conversation, you've touched on various aspects of it. I wonder if there's one piece of advice or one piece of kind of how your experiences in your research and practice kind of crystallize in this notion of how we can create lasting transformative change. And how do we do that together?
I'll say, and then Andy, I don't think being a purist is going to get us anywhere. And I think in this work especially, you have to compromise. And I understand, there's certainly a place for the idea and for folks to say, yeah, no, screw the system. I'm not working. Like, we need those folks.
Yeah, we see you, we hear you, we need you.
And we need you.
Yep.
And I also think we need folks like us as well who are saying, these are our institutions. These are ours. And we want them to be better. And I think when you have to collaborate with corrections, for example, and you have to collaborate with people who work in ways that you find reprehensible, it's important to remember that we are building systems and structures. It's individuals need jobs. Folks need to be able to support themselves, right? So this isn't about, that terrible officer. Like, if you're able to understand the prison as a system, that fundamentally changes the way that you engage. Because at the end of the day, if we don't get in to see our students, they don't get class. Yeah. So what's it worth me having an argument with this officer out here? Nobody gives a shit about that.
Right.
So let's actually keep what's the focus. And I think that requires a bit of maturity, but it also requires a perception, like an accurate perception of how we go about molding systems.
Yeah.
No, I love that. I think the work that we do can feel very fragile because we're building always on uncertain ground. We oversee 30 or 40 volunteers who will come in, and I am responsible for each and every one of them, and their actions inside are reflecting on our program and the training that we provide them to go in. And it requires kind of a vigilance to ensure that I'll say it frankly, not everyone should be inside of a prison, and that is not a knock on anyone. I think there are really great reasons why someone shouldn't be doing higher education in prison, right? It just doesn't mesh with their kind of political sensibilities, or that kind of deferring to officers, which we need to do so we have access to the class, just isn't in them when they're in the right. Like, those kind of things happen, but under that bigger question of like, what do we do for transformative change together, is we need to build and continue to build out that community here on campus, where we are, where we're teaching, right? We're educating folks going inside about what the work is and what it isn't, and putting folks in a position to be in the right place within this organization, because there's lots of ways to be supportive of this work. The need is bottomless, as Matt Mason said on campus a few months ago, and something that stuck with me, that we can't fill all the needs of folks who are inside. What we can do is build a community based on mutual trust, built on kind of a belief in one another, a belief in what education can provide to not only to folks who are inside, but their family members, and the hope that that brings, and also what this experience for graduate students, for undergraduate students, can do to help them see a world that otherwise wouldn't have been available to them to know so intimately.
I'll just add, and faculty.
And of course, faculty.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that, I will say this, when I arrived at the University of Utah, I knew of Erin's work, and I think what we have seen come to full, we're not done. I don't know that you're ever done. But a resilient coalition taking shape, our colleagues in the College of Humanities, our colleagues in the College of Education, folks within kind of central administrative units, that I do think the image of what we're after together has become clearer and clearer and clearer, and a testament to, okay, I think we can do that. Oh, look, you look back, we could. I think we can do that. Oh, look, we did it.
Yep.
And that forward momentum, it's been my experience, and watching you both again is more evidence for it. That positive, good momentum, once it's moving, again, once that resilient kind of coalition continues to expand further and further and further out, it becomes very difficult to say, well, I mean, that in and of itself begins to push away doubt and fear.
Yep.
Because trust and faith and hope begins to take its place. Because norm and know they are the ones that then they get on shaky ground.
Yep.
I am so thankful that you both took some time this morning to have conversation. And again, I want to say to viewers and listeners, if you've heard something here and you want follow-up, I know these two folks really well, and they are willing to answer any questions, to have any conversation, to bring you into that resilient coalition. We might even say beloved community of folks who are on a journey to getting it, to understanding it, to saying, hey, this could be a little different. That, and if you got a little extra money in your pocket and you're like, hey, I want to park that somewhere. Utah Prison Education Project.
Yes.
Thank you, viewers. Again, this has been Together, a Higher Ed podcast. Join us next time.